We call it, he's just going through something. We call it, this is just a rough patch. We call the same conversation for the eighth time progress. And none of that is a misunderstanding. It's a translation. We take something that we already understand and we hand it back to ourselves in a language that doesn't require anything from us yet. Because here's the part that nobody says out loud. Most of the time, we're not confused. We're not missing information. And the pattern already told us everything that we need. What we are missing is the willingness to let it mean what it means. Because if it means what it means, that means we have to do something about it. So we don't stay because the writing is not there. We stay because of the eraser. Welcome to Articulated Illustration, where we see things from unusual angles. I'm your host, Dwayne Richardson Sr., and this podcast is sponsored by me. But if you want to invest in purpose and build something together, I'm here for you. Today, we're going to talk about what that eraser actually is and why we reach for it, and how to know when hope has quietly turned into something else. The phrase, the writing is on the wall, comes from the book of Daniel, chapter 5. King Belshazzar is hosting an enormous banquet. The room is filled with power, wealth, noise, wine, and people who have every reason to keep the king comfortable. Then he crosses a line. He orders that the sacred vessels taken from the temple in Jerusalem be brought into the feast. Now he and his guests drink from them while praising idols made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. And in the middle of all that celebration, fingers appear and begin writing on the plaster wall near the lampstand. The king sees the hand moving. His confidence leaves his body. The man who controlled the room cannot control what has entered it. Belshazzar calls for the wise men of Babylon. He offers position, clothing, and gold to whoever can explain the message. But nobody can interpret it. Eventually, Daniel is brought in, and Daniel does not flatter him. He reminds Belshazzar that he already knew what pride had done to King Nebuchadnezzar, and yet he refused to humble himself. Then Daniel interprets the message. Belshazzar's days have been numbered. He has been weighed and found wanting. His kingdom will be divided. That very night, Belshazzar is killed, and the kingdom changes hands. The handwriting appears suddenly, but the pattern that produced it did not. Usually, when people say the writing is on the wall, they mean something bad is about to happen. But I want to take that cliche one step deeper. The wall is not always predicting a future that you know nothing about. Sometimes the wall is reflecting a present that you have refused to name. The unanswered messages, the promises with no changed behavior, the job that drains your health while offering no believable path forward, the habit that keeps charging interest on a moment of relief. And those are not isolated letters, my friends. Put them together and they begin to form a sentence. Here's the uncomfortable truth. We are often better at reading somebody else's wall than our own. We can see when our friend is being used, but when the same pattern shows up in our lives, suddenly we become translators. It's complicated. They are going through something. I have too much invested to stop now. Sometimes complicated is just clear, with consequences that we do not want to accept.
Word of the day.
Denial is a refusal to accept a painful or threatening reality, even when evidence of that reality is present. Denial does not always sound irrational. Sometimes it sounds loyal. Sometimes it even borrows the language of faith. I am just believing for better. God can change anything. And those statements can be true. But faith is not pretending that evidence does not exist. Loyalty is not a command to abandon discernment, my illustrators. Hope faces reality, and still believes that change is possible. Denial edits reality, so change does not feel necessary. That distinction matters. You can pray for somebody and still establish a boundary. You can believe that God can restore something and still admit that it is not restored right now. Denial keeps asking, what if it gets better? Discernment also asks, what is staying like this doing to me? Now, one reason why we erase the writing is investment. We have put years into it, money into it, prayer into it. We told people that it will work. So leaving does not feel like changing direction. It feels like declaring that the investment was wasted. But time already spent is not a reason to spend more time badly. Loving who somebody used to be does not require you to ignore who they repeatedly choose to be now. And for my illustrators, I know for a lot of us, that's a hard pill to swallow, but it's factual. There is a second reason, and it runs a lot deeper. Identity. If I am no longer the one who holds everybody together, who am I? If I leave this job after all these years, what do I tell people I do? And sometimes the place no longer serves us, but the role still makes us feel needed. And let me be clear. Seeing the writing does not mean making a reckless move. If your finances, housing, children, health, or safety are involved, wisdom may require a plan, support, documentation, and time. But preparation and denial are not the same thing. Preparation says, I see what this is, and I am building my next step. Denial says loudly, maybe if I wait long enough, I would never have to take one. And let's remember, courage is not always walking out today. Sometimes courage is finally admitting that you need an exit plan.
Here is today's articulated illustration.
Imagine a wall in a dim room, and on that wall are words written at different times. One line says they apologize, another says they did it again, and one says the job promised change. Another says nothing changed. Now, if you stand too close to the wall, you can point to whichever sentence supports what you want to believe. But when you step back, you can read the whole message. And this is what denial does. It zooms in on the exception so we do not have to confront the pattern. One good weekend becomes proof that the relationship is so healthy. One compliment becomes proof that the workplace values you. But a life cannot be evaluated from one convenient sentence, my illustrators. Let's learn to read the whole wall. Let's not be illiterate out of comfort. The wall is visible reality. The writing is repeated evidence, and the feast is distraction. Daniel is truth that refuses to perform for power, and the eraser is every excuse we use to keep reality from requiring a response. Sometimes the unusual angle is simply stepping back far enough to see what has been there the whole entire time. The writing shows up in three different places: patterns, peace, and price. Patterns, not one bad day, but repeated behavior that survives conversations, apologies, and chances to change. Peace, not the discomfort of growth, but the steady disturbance that comes from repeatedly violating what you know. And price, what is this costing you right now? Sleep, confidence, time with those who love you.
The mic drop.
Now, here's where we talk ourselves out of all three. If it were really that bad, something would have happened by now. Belshazzar was still at the feast. Music was still playing. The palace was still standing. If he had measured reality only by what hadn't collapsed yet, he would have mistaken delay for approval. Consequences don't always arrive at the speed of our choices. A bridge weakens before it falls, and trust disappears before a relationship officially ends. And delay is not approval. We have to remember that correction is uncomfortable and destruction is more expensive. So, what do you do when you can finally and willingly read the wall? I have 4 honest moves for you. First, write the evidence without interpretation. Remove the words maybe, probably, and they meant well. Start giving people excuses and crutches. Write what truly occurred. Second, name your eraser. Fear of being alone, money, shame, or the belief that leaving means that you failed. You cannot put down an eraser that you refuse to identify. Third, decide what the truth requires right now at this moment. Not every step for your rest of your life, just the next responsible one. A conversation, a boundary, a budget, and maybe even counseling. Removing access. Fourth, choose accountability. Denial has a tendency to grow in isolation because isolation lets us rewrite the story every time that it becomes uncomfortable. Tell one trustworthy person the unedited version. And if the situation involves abuse, threats, coercion, or immediate danger, do not turn this message into a confrontation plan. At the beginning, I said we don't stay because the writing isn't there. We stay because we are still holding the proverbial eraser. So maybe your question has been, how do I know for sure? But underneath that question is usually a smaller, harder one. How much certainty, how much evidence do you need before you give yourself permission to stop being hurt? We erase with excuses. We erase with one more deadline, one more promise, and one more maybe next month. But guess what? The wall keeps carrying what we keep trying not to read. So here's the question I want to sit with you. What truth have you already read but have not responded to? Do not make a reckless decision. Make an honest one. Name the pattern. Put down the eraser and take one safe, responsible step in the direction of truth. Because correction is uncomfortable, but destruction is way more expensive. And you do not need a eraser. You need the courage to read what is there. This is Dwayne Richardson Sr., and this has been Articulated Illustration, where we see things from unusual angles. And remember, you may not be able to change what has already been written on the wall, but you still have a say in what gets written next. So put down the eraser, face what is there, and always remember to do what's absolutely necessary every day and keep the pen in your hand. Why? Because that's your dream, it's your vision. Until the next illustration, we'll talk later.